Do you have to press record on your end as well? Or does
No,
it say
it says it's going.
nice?
Good,
Nice,
good.
guys. Nice, PJ. It seems like we are back. We are back to episode 51 of the Split Decision podcast. Now, PJ, should we point out the obvious? Can you point out the obvious? What is different about today's episode?
Yeah, you see, today's setup is a bit unconventional, some would say. Obviously, Roman and I are not physically side by side today. We are probably on your screen, but yeah, as you can see, he's dressed a bit nicer than me as well. He's eating some food. Obviously, he's in the good old downtown Chicago, right? Downtown Chicago, I believe.
Yeah,
Yeah.
praying,
Uh,
praying that this office space is as soundproof as they say it is. Um, I
yeah.
usually don't dress like this, guys. By the way, I just special occasion today. Found out who was president. For better or worse, PJ, who did you vote for? Just
Undisclosed.
undisclosed. We don't talk about this. The only decisions we care about are the ones that happen inside the octagon. And we got a couple things planned out for you today, guys. We were trying to make this happen a bit sooner, but it is what it is. We find a way. The Split Decision podcast always prevails. So to get into it, guys, we're going to talk about what took course over this past weekend. It was UFC Fight Night all the way over in Edmonton, Canada. First
Yes.
event in Edmonton, Canada for the UFC. Headlines by Brandon Moreno and Amir Albazi. PJ, I'm not sure if there's anything in the undercard slash prelims that you wanted to highlight that kind of stuck out with you. It was a good card overall, but any names or matches worth mentioning?
I would say Charles Jourdain. I think he moved down. Yeah, he moved down a weight class after getting absolutely pummeled by Gene Silva. He's fighting at bantamweight now. He got a submission victory. Nothing too crazy. Jack Shore lost to Yusuf Zalal, but other than that, I can't really say anything too exciting happened. So
No. And I'm praying that you guys aren't hearing my chewing right now. If you can't tell, I'm trying to kill two birds with one stone. We're recording the Split Decision pod, and I'm on my lunch break.
it
But we
wasn't that
pro-
obnoxious. I would tell you to shut up if it was obnoxious.
Thank you. But yeah, I mean, as BJ was saying, nothing too crazy that stood out on the prelims. Alexander Romanov, I'm sure you saw this, did get the victory, but also did get the boot from the UFC. It was another boring decision from Romanov, who came into the UFC with all the hype in the world, relatively, and has done well. I want to say he's something like 7-3, 8-2. Has
Yeah,
a very
he's been solid, but he's
mhm.
just once again kind of unwatchable at times.
And he is just a fat pig, if we're being quite honest. I will put up a picture of what he looked like before and what he looked like after, and you guys can be the judge and tell me if I'm maybe being a bit harsh on him. Um, as PJ was saying, though, Charles Jourdain did well in his move down to 135. Be interesting to see how that pans out for him. Mike Malotz back in the win column over in Canada. Jasmine Jasdavigius, I think she's on a three-fight win streak now.
To say, I honestly feel like she fights so frequently. I
Mhm.
feel like I swear I see her name all the
Yes,
time, and
I was.
she's had a great 2024. Yeah, she has. She lost to Tracy Cortez in the back end of 2023, and now she's won three straight again. So yeah, I believe she was 14th going into this. I think she fought. I think De Silva was number 13, so she'll be 13 now. I mean, she's 35. She's getting up there in age, but she's put together a pretty good 2024
Mhm. So
to
hopefully
say the
she
least.
carries into 2025. And I also agree. I feel like every other day I looked at a card,
Yes.
her name was on it. So props to her for being active. Um, I'm not gonna lie, I don't even know what happened in Brenson Ribeiro versus Cal Mikado.
Yeah. It was
Couldn't
pretty.
tell.
It was a pretty even fight. I mean, it obviously, as you can see, it was a split decision.
Shout out Split Decision Podcast.
Yeah, I think a lot of people had Kyle winning this fight, but I think part of that was the bias that he came into this fight as a favorite. But Ribeiro, yeah, he just a tad better. I don't really want to. I can't even really analyze. I don't know. Nothing too crazy to say about this fight. It was,
It's out.
anyways. To the co-main event we go, where there's some actual significance in this fight. In my opinion, no, not bigger than the main event, but it was close in terms of implications for the
Hmm.
title shot.
Absolutely.
Aaron Blanchfield fought the now I'd say it's crazy to say the veteran Thug Rose Namajunas. Blanchfield coming in, I believe she's only 25. I think Thug Rose is what 32.
Hmm.
Yeah, Blanchfield lost the first two rounds actually, and then kind of changed up the game plan, mixed in. I think only got like two or three takedowns throughout the fight, but just was a lot sharper towards the second half of the fight, obviously, and she won the. I think it was very, very obvious for scoring, and you don't see that often because a lot of the times judges you can never be sure or certain as to what they're going to do. But I think it was fairly obvious. Rose won 1 and 2, and then Blanchfield responded, winning 3-4-5.
Hmm. Yeah, and to your point, it was 48-47 across the board. I'm not exactly sure what the rounds looked like, but if, as PJ was saying, it was fairly obvious. Rose was kind of the quicker one on the feet the first two rounds, and then
Uh-huh.
Blanchfield ended up mixing in a bit of the grappling. Rose slowed down, and the younger fighter took the fight. What are we looking at in terms of rankings here? It looks like Blanchfield moved up to 6. Rose dropped all the way down to 8, which is you
Yeah.
hate to see.
Yeah, I
Um,
don't really know
for,
where you go with Thug Rose now. If I'm being honest, I don't think a title's in her I mean, I won't count her out because anything can happen. But at the same time, what'd you say? She's sixth in the rankings right
mhm,
now.
yeah,
I don't really know what you do with her. For Blanchfield though, I mean I forgot who she called out. I think she called out Grasso if I'm not mistaken.
I like that a lot.
Which I honestly like. It makes sense. Obviously, Grasso and Shevchenko aren't going to fight a fourth time for the belt, at least not right away. Um, I
And
think that
then
makes sense. But at the same time, the girl who just beat Blanchfield is also needing a fight. Fiorat. I always screw that up. Manon Fiorat is ranked second, and she is also without a fight. So it's I don't know. Blanchfield's in a weird spot. She might have to fight somebody below her, like a Macy Barber or a Natalie Silva. I don't know. We'll see.
well, I would only assume that Fiorot's going to get that next shot at the title because, as you
I
say,
guess
they're not.
that's true. I don't know why.
Yeah,
I've been so like used to just saying it's going to be Grasso versus Shevchenko for the past like 3 years. I guess yeah. Fiora will be fighting for the title next. That
yeah, I was
was
gonna say. I was like, PJ knows this. He knows this as well as anyone.
yeah. I don't know why. I don't know why I just blanked there. That was
I
dumb,
fucking
but
hate when you do that, dude. I fucking hate it.
oh yeah, yeah.
You,
Yeah, that's grin on your face. Can't even say that to your face.
you just make me
Yeah, I'm
smile,
an
man.
idiot, pretty much. But yeah, Shevchenko and Fiorat's next. So I think Grasso versus Blanchfield definitely makes sense. I don't really know if Blanchfield wants that from Grasso. In my opinion, I don't really see how she wins that fight. But hey, she's young. She's got.
I mean, you know me, I'd be rooting for Alexa in that match, but you and I both know that her grappling is not quite the level of an Aaron Blanchfield. So I could see Aaron definitely giving her problems in that match.
Yeah, she can. I guess I should put a little more respect on Blanchfield's name. But Grasso's just. I don't know.
She had a frustrating loss her last time out, and it was
She did.
largely in part due to Valentina's grappling. Um, but at least we don't have to see part 4 anytime soon. As for Rose, as you were saying, I don't really know what you do with her. She's in a weird spot. Ever since she kind of moved up, I want to say she's something like maybe 1-3, 2-3. I'm not entirely
Something
sure.
like that. It's not very. Hasn't
Yeah,
been super successful to say the least.
she's lost to she picked up a win versus Tracy Cortez her last out. She's
Yeah,
lost
that
to
was.
Fioriat, and I believe there's one. Oh, now she's lost to Blanchfield, so maybe she's 1-2. I think those are the only people that she's fought in that division, minus Jessica Andrade. But
She's
Jessica,
Yeah, she's 2-2. She's 2-2. She's lost to Fiorat and Blanchfield, and she beat Cortez and Rebus.
there you go. Um, so 50-50 spot for her. She's Rose. She's Thug Rose, not Eunice, though. So anything she does next, sure to cause a little bit of a stir. But as for now, we put her on the back burner and we go over to her 125-pound counterpart, Brandon Moreno, who put in a masterclass performance in the main event of this last weekend's card. PJ, I think
Mhm.
you watched every minute of the fight, if I'm
I did.
correct. What did you make of the first round to the fifth round?
I mean, there's literally no other word to say and describe this besides masterclass. I mean,
Mm.
he, phew. I uh, I was a little worried about Moreno considering his last fight against Brandon Royval. He just didn't look like himself. He looked hesitant. I honestly, my theory, and I'll stick to it. I know nobody ever, said anything out loud, but I really feel like Moreno had to have been hurt going into that fight because he was so hesitant to move forward. And I know part of that is probably because Royval is such a long dude and it's hard to get in range with a guy like that. Okay, maybe
He's real
maybe
long.
cut that part out. He's got a long wingspan. He's got long legs. Um, but back to the point I was trying to make is maybe I think he was either hurt or just a little bit too hesitant in that last fight versus Royval. But fighting a guy who's once again his size, Albazi, a guy who's I mean a lot of people, it's weird because I feel like he's a young prospect, but he's literally like 31 or 32 years
Mm,
old.
yeah.
But he's just a newer guy to the division, I should say, a new face. And I mean, there's literally no, I don't there's like no bright, not to like absolutely just crap on Albazi. There was not even like one positive that I can think
Hmm.
of to take away from this
Yeah.
fight from Albazi. He just got outclassed in every. I mean, they didn't go to the ground, so I can't say every aspect of mixed martial arts, but he just got pieced on the feet.
Yeah,
To put it lightly.
it's one of those situations where pretty much after the second round, it's almost a guarantee of who's going to win the fight.
Yeah,
As for Albazi, I know he was coming off of a heart surgery and possibly a lung surgery. I think there's a couple of
yeah,
surgeries in
he
between
had a
his.
couple. Yeah, he
Yeah.
did.
So obviously ring rust has to play a factor in it, but I mean, he didn't look his last time out against Kai Kara like the most impressive fighter, you know. It's kind of crazy that he's already ranked third in the division. I'm not quite sure who else he's beat. I don't know.
No, he just
I don't.
beat Kaikara and took his spot pretty much.
Yeah, exactly. And that was considered a robbery by most. But as for Brandon Moreno, he got his injuries healed up. Um, I thought his break was going to be a lot longer than what it was. I think it was something like 8, 9 months. And I remember when he announced it, I was thinking I wouldn't see him for 12 to 18.
Yeah,
Um, but regardless, in that short time frame, I know he said he took care of some injuries. He was getting a lot of miles in between all those championship fights with Davison Figueiredo and the other matches that he had, and it looks like he came in super refreshed, and you could just tell he hit that flow state really early on, and it was always going to be an uphill battle for Albazi from the get go. Obviously, I like it. I'm a fan. I like what I saw. He himself says he still thinks he's a win away before fighting for the flyweight title again. I would tend to agree.
yeah.
Although when he's fought, pretty much everyone in the top of the division, I don't really know where there is to go um, from there. Him and Royval are now both coming off of wins, but obviously we have to wait for Pantoja to take on Kai Asakura. So I don't know. What do you think, Paul? It seems we're a bit of a standstill here.
Yeah, we are. It's a weird spot. I think if it were up to me, what I think will happen, I think Royval will fight the winner of Asakura versus Pantoja. And I think maybe you give Moreno the loser of Pantoja versus Asakura. Um, I don't really see how else you go about that unless you're going to give Moreno somebody lower in the rankings, but I don't see why Moreno at this stage of his career would do that. Yeah, I mean, I don't really see how else you do that. You have to wait for the title fight to happen, and then I think from there, like I said, I think Royval has rightfully earned a excuse me a title shot next. What are they? They're fighting at 310. Yeah, 310 just in December is the. I was trying to look up the
Is that
date of
first
that.
week? I think that's first week of December, is it not? Sooner
Yeah,
rather than
December
later.
December 7th. So it's not too far away. So
Yeah.
yeah, I would assume.
They just
Yeah,
wait a little
I
bit.
think Royval. Yeah, like you said, a bit of a standstill just due to two guys ranked 1 and 2 coming off wins, but obviously Royval beat Moreno last time out, so if anybody's obviously going to get the shot next, I think it should be Royval.
And it's also, well, you also play into the possibility of Asakura beating Pantoja, at which point I think they might just go into the rematch from there.
That would really stand the division. That would really
Yeah.
screw the division up a bit. If that happens, then we might see a Royval versus Moreno. What would that be? That'd be a trilogy, right?
I think so.
I
I think
think
so.
Moreno beat Royval earlier on in his career. No,
He's fought
Yeah, he
everybody,
did.
man.
He knocked out
Yeah,
Royval
he
in
did.
2020.
Hmm. So yeah, I mean, he's no stranger to trilogies, quadrilogies, rematches. Regardless of who's standing in front of him next time, I would be concerned for the other guy. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Um, but yeah, it was good to see him back at his best. Hopefully, we see him back again relatively soon. And I look forward to seeing that Kai Asakura versus Pantoja fight next month.
that's gonna be sick.
Speaking of what's next, though, PJ, we got another UFC fight night this weekend. We were talking UFC Vegas 100, a century of UFC Vegas fights. Now, this I think is only fitting the main event, at least one half of the main event, because when you see this guy, all you can think is UFC Apex. PJ, who are we talking about here? Who are we talking about in the main event of UFC Vegas
Got
100?
to be talking about the greatest fighter to ever come off a loss in his career, Neil Magny. And let me tell you, I think he might get thumped in this fight badly.
No,
I think
no.
he's. I'm sorry, like Magny is arguably the greatest fighter of all time, coming off a loss in his mixed martial arts career, but he's fighting a killer, absolute killer, a guy who I think will be in the title picture for at least. I mean, what is he ranked right now? He's
Top
not even
two?
ranked.
Yeah, he's
Excuse
not
me,
ranked.
not
Yeah,
even ranked yet. So he's gonna absolutely thump Magny this weekend. Be 15, and he's 31. So he's a little bit he's older, but I mean he's still got. We're getting up when you get up in the higher weight classes. I think the age doesn't become as much of a factor as it does for like the little guys. But
yeah. Ooh.
Pratis is an absolute dog. He has knocked out his last one, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight, nine opponents.
In a row?
Nine consecutive knockout victories, all before the third. Never even reached the third round
Fuck.
in any of these nine fights. Obviously, he's 3-0 in the UFC. Well, 4-0 if you include the Contender Series. Yeah, last five fights outside the UFC, knockouts within 2 rounds. First four fights in the UFC, all knockouts within the first 2 rounds again. We regret to tell the betting people who think there's any juice on Magny, don't even think about it, dude. I'll gladly call myself an absolute moron if I am wrong, but Pratis is going to get Magny out of there before that third round bell rings.
Well, you say to all those betting people out there, don't even bother putting the juice on it. But PJ, I don't know if you know, but I'm sort of a betting man myself. And where you see nine straight KOs slash TKOs for Carlos Pratis, I see no back-to-back losses for Neil Magny within the past, I want to say, decade, decade plus. It's been years since he has
Screw,
lost back-to-back matches. Now
screw
it's
you.
probably been about 3 months since he probably lost a fight in August. But look at the record: win loss, win loss, win loss. Yeah,
The
he's coming
last
off a
time he
loss.
lost two in a row, it was 2013.
Exactly. So over a decade since he's taken back-to-back L's. Is Carlos Prates the man to do it? Probably. He probably is. I hate to inform everyone. But is it worth taking a look at Magny? I think it's always worth taking a look at Magny. Maybe he survives the storm for 2 rounds and does something similar to what he did to Mike Malott not too long ago and finds a late finish. That would be crazy. But I feel there's a little bit of Apex magic in the air this time around. I do feel we're going to get if we don't get we're either getting an execution, we're either getting a Neil Magny execution, or we're getting a classic Neil
If
Magny
he wins
comeback
this fight,
victory.
I'm gonna buy one of those shirts off TikTok shop that's literally for Neil Magny.
I feel we do spend genuinely a lot of time talking about him.
Because the dude won't go away, and it's not for a bad reason. Like I don't dislike the guy. I don't mean this in any disrespect. I just if he wins this fight, I will have nothing to say.
Well, it sounds like you got nothing to say right now. You know what I mean?
I
Also,
don't.
I'm really praying. Not really, but like I can only imagine what my coworkers think I'm doing in here right now. They see me on a call, obviously talking. They must think I'm doing something important, and I am. I'm doing the most important thing I do in my life,
You
the
are.
Split Decision Podcast co-host. Um, Also worth mentioning on this UFC Vegas card, I think, is Gerald Mearshart taking on the debuting and former one double champion Renier de Ridder, the Dutch Knight. Dutch Knight is a lot easier and a lot more cooler to say, so I'm
That
gonna
is
go with
a
that.
tough nickname.
But now that I'm looking at it, the Dutch Knight is minus 280, but he has two losses in his last three fights, which is a bit concerning, I think. And he's taking on the powerhouse, the all-time leader in submissions, I want to say, at middleweight, Gerald Mearshart. So, what do you think, PJ? Is there a chance that De Ryder is broad checked here, or is this money in the bank? What do you think?
I mean, thing is, Renier, whatever his name is, he's obviously he's had a very good career. He's obviously well decorated in the sport already. I would like to say that I think his debut. I wouldn't say they gave him a favorable fight because anybody who is a submission threat is never favorable to go against, whether no matter how good you are. Yeah, Mearshart, he's submitted his last two opponents as well, Shabazian and Barberena, two guys that aren't no slouches, I should say. Not nobody great, but no slouches.
They're tough.
Uh, yeah, no, they are. Um, but I've seen some highlights of Day Ritter, but I haven't really seen him ever fight a full fight before, so I don't have a whole lot I can necessarily say. I don't know
I
why
don't
you're
know.
squinting at me like that, so I'd love. What do you have to say about this one?
I just think it's so stupid that I have this fucking gimmick on. This looks terrible. This looks terrible. Like, but either way, no, I'd be a liar if I said I've watched this guy fight at all. I just know
I
the
was gonna try
accolades.
and give some analysis, but I can't give any. I'm not even gonna lie to you
I know
guys.
the accolades, and I know that in one of his fights, never mind, I was incorrect. Um, I don't know anything about this guy, but it'll be interesting to see somebody with some championship pedigree over in Asia's main MMA promotion, One, come over and see how they can deal with a UFC guy. And at that, as PJ was saying, a UFC guy with some submission pedigree and some definitely a lot of UFC experience. So look forward to that one. Make sure you circle it. As for anything else on the card, is it worth mentioning? There are a few names. Trayshawn Gore, formerly of Tough. I see Cody Stamen. I forgot what else I've seen him on. He's taking on
The
Damon
dweeb,
Blackshear. Yeah,
the dweeb Ricky Tercios fights.
yeah, that guy who was picking on a 20-year-old, fucking weirdo.
Yeah,
Uh,
trying to talk shit to a 19-year-old or whatever Rosis was at the time, and just got
and he
subbed.
and he fake glove tapped him too. I'm pretty
Yeah,
sure.
that's what it was. That's what pissed me off. Yeah, he did
Yeah,
the fake glove touch.
literally. Get a life,
He's a
buddy.
schmuck.
Yeah, Charles Radke, not to be confused with Tim Radke, of Munster, Indiana.
Hey, former title challenger in the women's strawweight division, Carolina. I'm not even gonna try and say her last. Carolina Kowa
She tried.
Kowalkiewicz.
She challenged for a title. Who did she lose to? I think I did know
She was
this.
actually, and you want to know something crazy? I'll never forget it. In the infamous Conor McGregor clip when he says, "Who the fuck is that guy?" to Jeremy Stevens. If you look in the bottom right of the camera, you can see
No.
laughing. And this was when, yeah, the same card, I believe, as Alvarez McGregor. She fought for the title against Joanna Jędrzejczyk.
No.
Jędrzejczyk.
Well, it's
In
funny you, as I say, it's funny you mentioned that because I'm looking at her first amateur bout. It was all the way back in March 4th, 2012, in Amatorska Liga MMA, which I can only imagine is in Poland or Eastern Europe somewhere. You know who she took on in that match?
I do not. It's not on ESPN, so
One, Joanna Jędrzejczyk, all the way back in
really.
2012. So, yeah, amateur MMA
Yeah.
though, so a bit different. Um, Went on to challenge for a title, as PJ said, and we're spending way too much time talking about her. Although she has come back pretty strong from a five
Yeah, I was gonna
loss
say she had a
streak,
pretty brutal.
late 2010s, early 2020s. She's turned it around. She put on a four-fight win streak, but she unfortunately lost in her last match out to Yasmin Lucindo, who I've never heard of until I read her name right now. Um, I look forward to her fighting this, who I can presume is not attracted to men, Denise Gomez. Uh, I can only assume as much. But anyways, PJ, we both knew, last week's card, this upcoming week's card, they have some names, but it's nothing crazy, nothing certainly worth yapping about for too long. So me and
No.
PJ kind of put our brains together. What can we give the people? What can we give the fans? And I think kind of in spirit of what's been going on in the country as of late, I thought, let's do some debates, man. Let's bring back the split in the Split Decision podcast. Because PJ, honestly, I think 90% of the time we agree on who's going to win fights. Let's talk about some topics within fighting and, kind of see where our opinions lie. And we're going to start with a big one. And it's a big topic every single year. And I'm really excited to get into it this year. We are going to be talking about boxing versus MMA, specifically in 2024. What has been more exciting? What has kind of caused more of a stir? What have been people been more paying more attention to, and just what have you liked more overall? And if you guys aren't familiar with the dynamics of the show, I tend to lean more a little bit more towards boxing fandom at times, and PJ's definitely an MMA guy, so you can imagine who he'll be talking about right now. PJ, give us your thoughts.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't like Roman said. I mean, it's not that I dislike boxing. I like boxing. I think everybody loves a good boxing fight. But from a UFC perspective, I feel like it's been, I will say at the beginning of the year, not necessarily the beginning. I'll say after UFC 300, I think there was a bit of a low point for the UFC just because of the fact that there were so many stars on that UFC 300 card that obviously the next couple cards we're going to have to sacrifice and not be as great. But I guess the one thing I'll do is quickly kind of just give a rundown of every UFC pay per view we've had so far. So the first one, UFC 290, and it feels like a decade ago, and it's crazy because you and I we were back in college when this happened, which
Don't
is really
remind me.
weird to think about it. UFC 297, which I believe Toronto, if I'm not mistaken. Let me see. Yeah, it was in Toronto.
I think it was.
Strickland versus Duplessis. That fight was absurd. In my opinion, a great fight.
Mhm.
Nothing too crazy on the undercard. Obviously, we just mentioned Neil Magny, the GOAT. He actually pulled off a crazy victory in that fight, but I'm not going to go too far because we don't have too much time. The next fight, I think I would say was starting to be a turning point in the UFC and the featherweight division when the Ilia Arturo knocked out. Can't even say that straight face. Ilya Taporia knocked out Volkanovski at 298. That also had Whitaker versus Costa. 9 was the Sugar Sean O'Malley versus Cheeto Vera 2. Another card that, I mean, that card, a lot of people were concerned that UFC 300 wasn't going to be as good because the fact that 299 was absurdly stacked. But I think that one lived up to the hype as expected. But then here we have UFC 300 that happened April 13th, I believe. Yes, April 13th. Headlined by a Fighter of the Year candidate, Alex Botan Pereira. But in my opinion, like one of the most fun times I've ever had watching a UFC card from start to finish, just due to the amount of star power that was in there and the performances that these fighters put
Mhm.
on was incredible.
What about
UFC
301?
See, then this is the problem that I think a lot of people had with the UFC was yes, the UFC 300 was one of the most exciting times in the mixed martial arts world, they won, but at what cost did they win? UFC 301 was headlined by Alexandre Pantoja and Steve Erceg. A lot of people were confused as to why Steve Erceg was given a title shot. And partially, I think that's just because the flyweight division doesn't have a whole lot of star power. And I think they were trying to do something new. They were trying to give it to like a guy that no one's ever heard of before, and have him go up against the unbeatable, not unbeatable, but like just an absolute stud champion versus an unknown guy. The storyline was pretty cool. The fight itself definitely delivered, but the fight card overall, I should say, did not live up to the potential
Nah,
that I think a lot of fans wish. But then we're at 302, which was Makhachev versus Poirier. When we got back to, I'd say, the first big fight since UFC 300. Obviously, the undercard wasn't anything spectacular. Obviously, Makhachev and Poirier put on a great fight. Mach won, fifth round sub. UFC 303, which was supposed to be headlined by the Notorious, sadly didn't happen. But here, steps in the card saver, the greatest card saver in UFC history, Alex Pereira versus Prohajka 2. Pereira puts on a masterclass, absolutely destroys Prohajka. And at this point, I think a lot of people thought that the first round knockout by Jamal Hill, complemented by the knockout of Jiri Prohajka, was just enough that this is a lock. This guy's going to be fighter of the year. Pereira is pretty much looking unbeatable at this point, and we'll get back to him in a second. Actually, as we had UFC 304 headlined by Edwards and Bilal Muhammad, and I think the UFC was hitting a bit of. And this is no disrespect, but at the same time, it might be a tad. Just Bilal Muhammad being the main event in a championship card definitely hurt the UFC at least a little bit. Maybe not as bad as people think because Bilal's a champion now. He won. He put on a masterclass, not a masterclass, I should say, but an impressive performance. Um, he won the belt over Rocky Edwards in Rocky's home country. You want to say something?
You bastard. I see what you're doing here. You're wasting all my fucking time. That's what you're doing. We're at a minute left on the clock, and I haven't even got a
Are
word in.
we? Well, that's why I said we shouldn't put a timer on this. I was trying to quickly go over everything.
Well, you know, I'm going to cut you off. I'm going to cut you off because all I need is a minute to talk about boxing in
All right,
2024.
boss.
Okay, DJ? Boxing in
Let it,
2024 has been better than boxing has been in nearly 2 decades of the sport. I mean, we've had some big ones. We've had the Canelos fight of the world. We've had all the big stars fighting, right? But what's been more important than ever is that we've had the big stars fighting each other. Just a few I wanted to name off for sure. I mean, we had Anthony Joshua taking on Francis Ngannou. I mean, unfortunately for the MMA fans and myself, because everyone who doesn't root for Francis, terrible KO loss. One of the most vicious knockouts I've seen in a very long time. We
brutal.
also had another vicious beatdown and something that was kind of a talking point throughout the entire year. Ryan Garcia taking on Devin Haney. I mean, I think in terms of just like the storyline that's gone on in any single fight this year, that was the longest and the most interesting by far. I mean, even people who don't even follow combat sports in general, they knew what fucking Ryan Garcia's crazy ass was doing, and I loved every single second of it, barring a few tweets and a few words here or there. You know what I mean? But it certainly built the fight. Um,
Definitely.
some other fights that stood out. I mean, I'm just taking a look here. Vasily Lomachenko, George Kambosos, and then of course we had Tyson Fury taking on Alexander Usyk. I think that was May 25th. I mean, and that was literally one of the greatest heavyweight fights of all time. Like, Fury winning the rounds early on, Usyk then hurting Fury as bad as Fury's been hurt in a very long time. If those ropes weren't there, I'm not sure if he went down, he was going to get back up. Barely survived the round, and ended up scoring a really close decision victory over Tyson Fury. And I'm really happy we're going to see that rematch. I think before the end of the year. I think that's in December, but I could be wrong. Um, other What else happened on that card was Joseph Parker beating Zhilei Zhang, who's a really accomplished Chinese heavyweight boxer. So that was also cool to see. Gervonta Davis fought this year against Frank Martin. Vicious knockout. You guys got to check that out. Anything else on here? Of course, later on this month, we have Jake Paul versus uh, the returning Iron Mike Tyson. I mean,
Crazy.
that just gives me chills to think about. I remember when we watched Tyson's last fight out, and I remember like literally turning to you and being like, I can't believe I'm about to watch Mike Tyson fight, and I can't believe I'm about to watch Mike Tyson fight again. Um, Canelo Alvarez, he took on Edgar Berlanga. Unfortunately, he is still not taking on the name that everyone's been vying for him to take on in David Benavidez. Hopefully, we see that soon. But also another great heavyweight boxing match between Anthony Joshua and Daniel Dubois. Dubois put down Joshua, I want to say, 3 or 4 times. And the last time, I mean, he was obviously down for the count. It was really bad.
That was
That
crazy to
was
watch. I'm
vicious
gonna be honest,
knockout.
it was crazy.
Yeah, and then just the most recent one probably that was taking the headlines was the unstoppable force, Artur Beterbiev taking on the immovable object and Dmitry Bivol, number one pound for pound for all the undisputed belts in the light heavyweight division at 175. Beterbiev ultimately ended up scoring a slight victory over Bivol, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see that fight again. I've been really happy with what I saw out of boxing this year. And maybe when you look at the numbers, UFC outperformed it. Who's to say? I really don't know. But all I know for sure is that it was the best year that they've had in quite some times. And I think you would agree with me on that, PJ.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, I think the difference is that the UFC, obviously, I would say there's more fights, more big fights frequently than boxing. While I definitely agree, it's the most boxing I've ever watched in my life. Like I feel like this is the most fights I've ever actually sat down and watched live in my life in a calendar year for sure. So boxing, in by like I said, I don't even dislike boxing. I just prefer MMA. Boxing has had a hell of a year, and they're not even done yet. Obviously, I can't believe that you and I are going to actually get to witness Mike Tyson fight live twice in our
Yeah,
lifetimes. Like, I find that quite absurd. If you were to say that, like when I was a young kid, like you were to tell us when we're young kids, like, hey, you're going to see Mike Tyson fight twice in your
I'm like,
like live.
I'm like, when the hell is this happening?
Like, there's no shot. But
Fight on the
yeah, that
street, maybe.
happening, that itself is just absurd. But yeah, no, listening to you and obviously, I think all the fights you said, I've at least I've watched pretty much live. So it was a hell of a year for boxing. But the thing for me is I'm not sure I can say fully which one outperformed the other. I think it's more so just the volume the UFC puts out. I mean, there's a pay-per-view pretty much every month, I would say, if not every 6 weeks versus boxing.
Hmm.
So it's hard to tell because the workload isn't quite the same
Hmm.
in terms of like big events every so often. But I mean, I would say everybody loves a great boxing fight. I mean, not that everybody doesn't love a great MMA fight, but I
Boxing,
don't
yeah,
know. Usyk, I mean, I even had chills when Usyk and
yeah,
Fury were fighting, and even Garcia versus Haney. Like,
mm,
I don't know. I
yeah.
don't know if I'm comfortable or I have like enough research done to say which one I believe is having a better year because I believe I mean, it's hard when like you said, boxing has probably had the best year it's had in like a couple decades, but then
Hmm.
again, the UFC had their biggest event of all time this year. So it's in UFC 300. So it's tough, but it was a great. Like I enjoy this conversation because
Yeah,
both it's great for us that we have a combat sports podcast, and I feel like this year in combat sports has been
yeah.
nothing short of not perfect, but just
C-
like
Continues to
amazing,
be on the up.
weird,
Continues to be
amazing.
on the up. Continues to be on the up. We've been at it for 2 years now, PJ, and I think we can confidently say that each year we've had more and more things to talk about and more people to talk about it
Yeah,
with. So that's always good to see. But moving on, obviously this timer didn't do shit because we talked
let me
about
say
that,
the timer didn't. Maybe at least for this topic, the
but
timer probably wasn't going to do any good.
yeah. But this one, I think this next one, and I don't know what you're going to go with here, but we're going to talk about. You want to talk about best physical attribute to have in MMA? I think.
Yeah, this is a weird and interesting topic because there's so many different bases, so many different builds you can like in the UFC. Like we literally have everything
Yeah,
in the UFC. Um, I
but
don't
I
know
think.
if you have yours right off the top of your head.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
all right?
and
I'll let you go first.
we're not talking specifically about styles here. We're not talking wrestling, MMA, because me and PJ would probably just both say wrestling if anything. I'm talking
Yeah,
physical attribute, and I think there is no better physical attribute than cardio. I think you need cardio in every single aspect of MMA, every single sport. Cardio plays a factor. Maybe besides like baseball or some shit. I don't know, unless you're a pitcher. But anyways, I think cardio is by far the most important necessity, I guess, that every fighter needs. I think as you get up in weight, maybe it plays less of a factor, but I would say at least 125 through 185. I mean, it's absolutely crucial. How many times do you see a fighter start off great? Maybe you even think, pound for pound, they might be the more skilled fighter, but once that clock gets past 8 9 minutes, the punches start slowing down, the shots get slower and less frequent. you know Chael Sonnen likes to say exhaustion
yeah,
makes cowards of us all. So and I think that rings true every time I watch a fight. That is something I absolutely have to pay attention to. How is this guy looking between rounds 1 to 2 to 3, maybe even to 4 and 5? And I can only imagine how many championship fights cardio has decided, which is why I think it is the most important physical attribute a fighter needs to have. That being said, PJ, what do you think?
yeah. I definitely agree with you. Cardio right now. Excuse me, I'm very stuffy today. Cardio obviously is as we. I'm trying to think. There's definitely some examples like Marab versus Sugar Sean. Obviously, Marab could go to 15 rounds probably in one night, three different main event fights and not get tired. Um, I think this would be crazy if at the start of our podcast if you heard us say this, be nuts. But Dricus Duplessis has cardio for days. Apparently, he's an absolute dog. So yeah, I mean, there's definitely it's hard to say cardio is not the most important because it definitely is. In terms of other physical attributes, I'm trying to think like what else really stands out outside of cardio. Um,
You could
and for
pick up.
me, I was taking a look at all the UFC champions who are currently champions right now, and a lot of them aren't necessary outside from 120. Speaking of 125 to 185, I was going to say like wingspan, length being a bigger, but not really. I being a short, stockier guy, like being a stocky dude
Yeah,
that just like, has a lot of like I don't know how to say this without it being weird, but just like a guy that's got
girth.
I'm not, yes, okay. I wasn't gonna say it, but you said it. Yeah, just like
With.
dudes like that. Like if you look at the champions, like Pantoja, short, stocky guy. Marab,
Hmm.
short, stocky dude. Taporia, I don't know if
Yeah,
I'd say he's short for his weight class, but he's a stocky, strong dude. Makachev, not he doesn't he has Makachev has a shorter wingspan than Volkanovski, so obviously
hmm
he's not. Even though I'd say Mak is decently tall for the weight class, he's still a stockier dude.
hmm
Then you got Bilal. He's obviously not very tall. He's a stock. And Hendrickis also just another like I don't know what the exact attribute I'm trying to say here is, but I feel like as of recent, these stockier dudes who aren't necessarily super long have kind of taken over the sport in a way.
I could absolutely agree with you to that, and it's I like the way you kind of went about it, looking at the champions and kind of seeing how they're all similar in terms of you know physicality.
I didn't include Pereira and Jones because they're obviously absurdly
Yeah,
tall. But
yeah,
then again, in my opinion, the heavier weight classes versus the lower weight classes it's almost a completely different, not completely different sport, but it's a whole different ball game. But
yeah,
yeah,
for sure.
back to what you were saying.
And I think I think what really that kind of like the height and I don't yeah again it's really hard to describe what we're talking about here,
I
but
don't know what I'm trying to say here either, but
compactness I guess like the
yes, I guess so.
compactness of these fighters why it plays such a role is because obviously one I think they carry a lot of power and a lot of power in close, right? But two, and you could see this in the Islam versus Volkanovski fight, especially, is it's hard to take those guys down when they're so low to the ground. They have a
Yeah,
nice low center of gravity, right? They can get their hands underneath, get the underhooks in faster,
yeah,
right? And so it's a bitch to take them down. They can fight, inside the pocket with your knees or elbows and everything, every weapon needed. Because when you're a taller guy, and you're on the inside with these guys, which God knows how often you end up on the inside in MMA. But all those weapons that are great when you're out here aren't so great when you're in close. Like
no.
you can't
They
punch
kind of
like
played. They're kind
yeah
of a disadvantage to you because you
mhm.
have. It's going to take you a lot longer to get your long ass arms around onto somebody's face compared to
Yeah,
a guy like Marab who
mhm.
literally just yeah.
And
I
also
don't once again even know what I'm trying to say, but at the
yeah
same time I do know what I'm saying.
yeah no
Uh,
and also maybe just one other thing is like just the length and like when there's a leg hanging out there and for a wrestler like how easy it is for them to be able to grab a leg and flip you over, you know. But
yeah.
I don't want to get far into this category because
I wish there was like a word that I could think of that describes what I'm trying to say, but there really isn't. It's just these guys they're not short. They're
yeah,
just stocky dudes, and like you said, they're like not tall enough to the point where they're easy to take down, but they're not too short to the point where they have like a massive like weight or
Chris,
height. Well, not weight, but a massive height difference to the point where they're like
yeah,
outmatched.
yeah, where they're completely like relegated to the outside the entire time.
Yeah.
Interesting take, PJ. I like it. We're working with 4 minutes left here. Maybe we have one uh, thing to talk about. Do you want to talk about Fighter of the Year real quick? Do you want to make your case for Fighter of the Year? Even though I'm pretty sure we both agree on who we think should get it.
Yeah, and
I
here
won't.
the thing is, yeah. Well, what were you gonna say?
Whoever you vote go for, I will make a case for the other guy.
Well, first off, if you don't already know, we're talking. The only two people in this conversation are Ilya Taporia and Alex Pereira. I mean, both have knocked out all their opponent. Well, Taporia's got knocked out both his opponents. Pereira's knocked out all three of his opponents. Um, Pereira's got 3 title defenses. Taporia's first knockout was obviously to win the belt. This last knockout was his first title defense. Um, it's just, and I feel like this is kind of similar to like college sports. I think you got to take into factor the strength of schedule here. And Ilya Taporia, he's fought arguably out if Jose Aldo isn't in conversation, the two greatest featherweights of all time. At least in like, I mean, I don't know if you want to include Jose in the modern era,
Hmm.
but as of late, the two greatest featherweight fighters of all time, and he made light work of them. I mean,
Hmm.
Holloway put up like Holloway wasn't getting absolutely destroyed, and I wouldn't say Volk was either, but just the way he did it, you could just tell he's at least a level or two ahead of both those guys, and
Yeah,
it's crazy to say that because I forgot what event Volkanovski fought Yair Rodriguez at.
but he looked
What
like a world. Well, I don't know. I'm not
he
sure, but
looked
he.
like? I didn't think anybody in the entire world was ever going to beat him for a long time.
Hmm. Yeah, no,
Um,
he crushed
and
him.
now, Taporia simply made light work. Pereira, I mean, I guess I'll let you get in more into Alex Pereira's side of things, but for me, it's just the strength of schedule. I think puts Ilya just a bit ahead, and the fact that he knocked out Max Holloway, a guy who we thought was pretty much like impossible to knock out, he simply floored him
Yeah,
brutally.
yeah.
No other.
Obviously, it is tough to argue against Ilya Taporia being fighter of the year. Only thing I could really point to is just the consistency in which he fought, which is only one more time than Taporia, and that
Yeah.
being against the number 13th ranked light heavyweight at the time as well. He has taken on and defeated former champion Yuri Prohashka, finished him faster and more definitively than he did the first time out, and then
Definitely.
took out Jamal Hill, who is just the worst human being on the planet. But he went to war with Khalil Roundtree, and that was a very fun fight, certainly, right? But again, the ranking kind of comes into play, strength of schedule comes into play. I think an interesting point that needs to be raised here is if now it doesn't look likely, but if he were to take on Ankalaev and replace Bilal Muhammad and Shavkat at the I think was that UFC 311, if he were to do that, I think
Be
regardless.
310. Yeah.
Okay. Well, either way, I think regardless if he wins or loses that fight, if he takes on Ankalaev short notice for a fourth, I think you have to give him fighter of the year just purely because of the activity. Four title defenses in a year,
I
as
I
I don't
agree.
know, has been heard of before, and if it has been, it has to have been probably since we're in the hundreds of the UFC, if that. You know what I mean? Um, but one thing I do want to point out, PJ, is you are wearing a shirt that I bought you many years ago. Are you not?
You- I am, yeah.
Yes.
I was actually thinking about that as I was heading down here. I was like, dude, I am wearing this shirt and Roman's probably I was assuming you're gonna be dressed all nice. I'm like, I'm sitting here wearing this Arsenal shirt that he bought me
Who
years
fucking
ago.
cares, dude? At the end of the day, when we track the metrics every week, guys, 95% of our audience only listens to the audio version, and the other 5% watches the video. So
Yeah.
most of you guys don't
Yeah,
even know
actually
that.
to go off your point real quick, there's been 7 fighters who have defended their UFC titles 3 times in a calendar year. Nobody, at least unless I'm missing something, I don't think anybody's ever defended their title 4 times in a calendar year. And it's not looking likely for Pereira. It's not, I mean, even if he fought, it'd be crazy even if he fought like early 2025, but that's looking like the more likely possibility. But yeah, we have guys like Kamaru Usman in 2021, Demetrius Johnson in 2013, Chuck Liddell in 2006, Matt Hughes 2002, Tito Ortiz 2001, Frank Shamrock in 98, and Pereira is obviously the most recent guy to do it in 2024.
Mhm.
He has the record, Pereira, right now for the shortest time in between 3 title defenses at 175 days, which is
That
absolutely
is
nuts because
fucking crazy.
that's less than half a year if you think about if you go through the time period, just a bit less than half of a year in between three
Yeah,
title defenses. So
I
I
mean
mean,
April to
yes, I
October.
agree. I do think Taporia deserves it, but if Pereira fights for a fourth time and knocks out Magomed, I don't think it's even. I'm not gonna. I don't even
No,
have an
it wouldn't
argument
be.
anymore. Taporia.
That would be the year or the what am I trying to say? The year of the decade? Like that would
That'd
be the
be the
greatest.
great. I mean, that's arguably like the greatest calendar year in UFC history by a
Yeah.
fighter.
Yeah, but we'll see what happens. Needless to say, guys, my lunch break is pretty much over. So that will do it for episode 51 of the Split Decision Podcast. But as you guys can see, we are dedicated to giving you guys the best and most amateur combat sports takes on the internet. I think we accomplished that today, PJ. I appreciate you for being on your toes, on your feet, and able to get this done. Anything you want to say to the people before we sign off today?
No, I mean obviously thank you guys as always. It's fun. Obviously Roman and I we've been talking about this for a long time. It's obviously always a pleasure to do this on camera and have other people, give their thoughts and opinions and feedback to our content. Very much appreciated. Appreciate you, Roman, taking the time out of your day, your hardworking day, dressed all nice, to give an
Yeah,
hour of your time to the Split Decision podcast.
as always.
I was going to say one more thing, and I absolutely forgot what I was going to say. There
God
was one more thing I had to say.
damn it, PJ. I can only stall for so
Oh,
long.
well, I don't know if this is it, but yeah, I feel like we should definitely do more of these debates or at least discussion. I could put out a poll on TikTok. You could put and Twitter. You could do one on Instagram, and maybe we can get some other topics from the fans. If they have suggestions that they want to hear,
Yeah, I
you and I
agree as
either
well.
go at it or just discuss. I think that's fun
Yeah,
because yeah, I mean it's cool to do something new. So yeah, I think if anybody has suggestions for topics, we're always open to discuss.
yes. Please let us know. You can check us out on Instagram at the Split Decision Pod and on Twitter at Pod Split DEC. Um, thank you guys for tuning in as always, and we will catch you guys later. See you at the top.